Okay.
Hello, I'm Tara Brabazon.
And I'm Mick Winter.
And we are together. People who have heard a lot of my podcasts and know a lot of my writing and teaching know that I've had the great pleasure of meeting and working with Mick Winter through many different countries and many different universities, and unbelievably sitting in Bathurst in New South Wales, this wonderful man happens to be in my office. And it's just tremendous. As we were just saying, we know each other so well, and yet finally meeting has been an incredible experience.
I've been in California. Usually she's been in a variety of cities and countries around the world. And now here we are, together again for the first time.
It is, and it just feels thrilling. And the weird thing is, what we wanted to talk about today was a combined project that we did when we were apart. And actually we're missing a third wheel on our car. A wonderful gentleman by the name of Bryn Gandy. So we'll do a big shout out to Bryn.
Hello, Bryn.
Hope you're well, Bryn. And the three of us got together and we wrote a book. An important and significant book for Springer, and great respect to our colleagues and editors at Springer. You've been tremendous to work with. And this book is titled Digital Wine. And I thought we'd use this time that we're spending together to have a little podcast and talk about this book, Digital Wine. So really, Mick, in some ways, you wrote the book before we got here. You completed that amazing book on QR codes.
Right, that was the predecessor, but believe me, it's gone much further under your
Oh, see, I don't think Digital Wine, well, I know Digital Wine wouldn't have been written without that QR code book. But let's start there. Part of what we're doing in Digital Wine is talking about the role of QR codes in the wine industry. What is it, mate?
Well, to back up a little bit, I did a master's degree under Tara when she was at the University of Brighton. And I did it from California. And one of the projects I worked on was using QR codes, little square codes that are similar to the next generation of barcodes. And I used those in the town of Napa, where I live in California, in the Napa Valley. And we placed those at various locations around the town where people could easily see them. And then people could come by, scan, and get information about store hours, history of a particular location.
Menus?
Menus, yeah, everything. So we did that experiment and got some success. And more than anything, we created awareness, increased, well, usually first time awareness, and then increased awareness of the QR codes themselves and how they can be used. So that was a fun project. Out of that, I was so intrigued, and I had a lot of material, that I decided, why don't I make a book? So I wrote a book about QR codes, which is on the market now, and how to use them. Very simple, many hundreds of examples how they can be used. Tara, knowing that, went ahead and said, why don't we
apply it? Because part of what you talked about in the QR code book was how these little tiny analogue objects, often on pieces of paper or business cards or newsletters or magazines, could be scanned by a smartphone, a mobile phone like an iPhone, and linked directly to a website. So part of what my politics is, it's a politics that we share, is that we want citizens to have more information about lots of things in their lives, but also the food that's going into their body, you know, the things that they're actually consuming literally. So I said to Mick and to Bryn, I'm terribly interested in enhancing the citizenship through consumerism, and I wonder if QR codes could be used in a way that would enable that. But the problem was a very specific group of people were using them, and ironically it's sort of linked with the audience for wine. So should we get to wine, Mick? Why did we decide, obviously you're a great wine journalist, you've got a whole career working in wine, so why did we decide, well, let's look at wine and QR codes? Why was that the first focus?
Well, from my point of view, I think because wine as a point of sale item, there's not much you can find out about it. There's not much that can fit on the label, but with a QR code on the label and people scanning it, they can instantly see information about the history of the wine. They can see a video on the winery, an interview with the winemaker. They can see suggestions how to use, what to serve the wine with. And all of that out of this little small code.
Yeah. And it was interesting too, I mean, there's so many things sociologically. You gave us a great sociology of the QR code because you discovered, for the research that you'd done in quantitative terms, it was the early adopter profile. So it was male correct me if I'm wrong, Mick, it was like 24 to about 39, but very high income bracket.
Right.
100,000 and over, I think, was the figure. Now, that's a very unusual sociological grouping. So I thought, well, what is the product that is particularly geared at that group? And obviously, ultra premium wine was one of those. So it seems odd, I know we had this sort of social justice imperative coming to this project, and yet we started with elite ultra premium product.
And many of those ultra premium wines are made by very small wineries. The big wineries have no trouble getting their message across, their marketing message. The small ones have a hard time. So this gives them a way that they can be out there just as much as the big ones can at almost no cost.
Because another sub-project that we're both very much interested in is regional development, particularly for what are called third-tier or small cities. So Napa is a great example.
Napa, California is one.
Bathurst is another great example. There's this inland ring of third-tier cities in New South Wales where we are now. So if you're interested in regional development, particularly for primary producers, one of our projects was really how do we use digitised mechanisms, if you will, to enable those analogue projects. And I think that's probably what drew us to it, I believe. So wine matters, and I think it was a good case study. Do you think it was pretty successful?
Yes. What I did, I mean, my project?
Yeah, your project, and also why we chose wine. I just wondered, now that we've
I
produced
think
the book.
it's a great one.
Yeah.
I hear what you're saying, is that the wine industry is an excellent test example of what can be done by small businesses, by communities and regions, in many other areas. And one other area we've talked about is food, which of course goes with wine perfectly.
Yeah, and I think in some ways when I came to this project, you and Bryn had that great wine expertise, I less so, but I was very interested in, having lived in Oshawa, which is, you know, an industrial centre where GM was based in Canada. In Ontario, and we were living in a pretty tough place, can I say, in downtown Oshawa. Those of you that know downtown Schwa know exactly what I'm saying. And the lack of opportunity, the lack of choices for people living in that region, often without a car, to actually select high quality foodstuffs, so they knew what was going in their body. That really disturbed me because it was a pretty polluted environment, and it also felt like the food was very polluted. So how do you intervene between the product and the consumer so that information is available just in time? And so food was really, I suppose, where I was going. But how do you think this project could be extended? I think there is another book for us, and what would that book look like for food, do you think?
Well, what would you think, since you think it?
I mean, I think for small producers, it's everything.
Absolutely.
I think.
Yeah.
But also make for consumers, so that people. I mean, maybe I'm just delusional and have sort of my social justice imperative here, but I want people to have readily available information about what is going into their body, and if technology and a mobile phone can help them do that, I think that's tremendous.
Well, more and more, at least in the States, people can scan a banana or an apple or something and find out not just what the name is or whatever. They can find out where it grew. They can track it all the way on its path by date to the time that they buy it, and they can find out in what manner it was grown, whether chemicals were used or not.
So there's the healthful elements of it as well, so you actually know what you're eating. But I think there's also the other element, which I particularly enjoy, that I want to support primary producers. And I'm sure you do as well, I'm sure a lot of viewers do. And yet, if we don't have the information about where those fruits and vegetables and meats and so forth are coming from, there's no mechanism for us to support the people that we would like to support. And the QR code can provide the window, the opportunity for us to have that information.
And the way for it to communicate, so people can connect with and communicate with those primary producers. Say, I like your product, or how about doing this, or what else do you have, or where else can I buy this?
Oh, and I think that's tremendous, and there's also obviously the vouchers and the coupons that can come that way as well. But just to give another Canadian example, ice wine is a great example, I think. It's grown in very few areas and a hyper-specialist product. And I think at the moment ice wine, it's almost all within Canada, it's sold within Canada.
Yes, some of the northern parts of the States are doing it. Some of them are fudging about it. They're kind of freezing it themselves rather than let nature do it.
Which is slightly disturbing.
Yes.
But as ice wine perhaps does expand and gains an export market, I think it's one of those great products that there's so much invested in how it's produced that we'd all love that story, I think. And I'm sure there are lots of products, whether it be avocados, whether it be bananas, whether it be Ethiopian coffee, that I think a lot of us would like to know about.
And of course, we don't have to stop at food, because beyond that is anything, particularly anything made by artisans and craft work and craft clothing, what have you. It's an opportunity. There's so many opportunities now for entrepreneurs to create products and sell them online, or primarily online, and this way people can buy them and really see the history and the possibilities.
Oh, it's tremendous, and it's so important, I think, that creative industry strategies, which I call this is part of a creative industry strategy. Isn't it fabulous that it's been used on primary production and with craft? For me, that is just, you know, people glibly talk about small and medium-sized businesses. Well, here it is, and here's a great strategy for them.
A one-person business, a one-woman business can put a QR code in the product and get the same powerful effect that a mammoth corporation can.
And QRs are
it really
free,
levels the playing field.
Free to generate. The readers are free. I mean, this is incredible. It can go on the back of business cards. This can really, I think, change the way we think about disintermediation and the relationship between producers and consumers.
I think QR codes really haven't taken off yet. Most of us are familiar with them now. They're used a lot in marketing, but there's so many more uses that can happen with them, and they will. And
in a really socially just way too, connecting people up authentically with what's going into their body and what they're buying. Yeah. Final question, Mick. Hasn't this been brilliant having us together like this, by the way?
It has indeed.
You're so stuck with me.
About time.
About time.
Yeah.
Now, this is a great question for us both, actually. And your answer and my answer is probably quite different, let alone Bryn's. But who could, and do you think who should, read this book?
And I will be interested to hear your answer, because I think yours is a different area. For me, it's for small wineries and small wine regions. In California, we have a variety of, for example, we have a variety of wine regions. The Napa Valley, the Santa Ynez Valley, the Sonoma Valley, the whatever. But within those there are also appellations. The Carneros district in the Napa Valley, which produces more Bordeaux, or Burgundy, sorry. We must have 15 or 20 sub-regions just within the Napa Valley. Each one of those can promote their types of wine by using these. So they'll need to read it.
So it's
any small winery, any region, any small local trade group.
See, it's fantastic. So for an already established wine region, to differentiate the market, it has profound use. See, I hadn't thought of that. I think that's brilliant. My interest was also in the emerging, the new wine industries, of which, you know, the New Zealand wine industry was an important case study for us, with the ultra premiums, particularly beyond Marlborough. And so for me, that was quite important. So it was a way to answer back, if you like, to the European Union differentiation. If you can't use Burgundy, you can't use Champagne. I love the idea that we use digitisation to answer back to our former colonial masters. Right. That, in a post-colonial thing, I really enjoy. So I think for people starting new forms of businesses, I hope they read it, because I think it's a real opportunity using free applications to really punch above their weight.
Sure. And even though this particular book does not talk about food, that of course is, and that's such a close relationship with wine, that it's obvious that small producers should be reading this too.
Absolutely, and I think the second book we will go there, and I certainly foreshadow in the introduction before your precise work on QR codes that, you know, this can very much work in food, and also branding a region up, the relationships between food and wine as well, I think.
Yep. I think it's very exciting.
Look, I do. Yeah. It's a funny thing when...
We should start a winery.
We should start a winery, except you've got all the expertise and I have no expertise. I haven't got all the money. Oh, thank you for sharing that with me and my bank manager. The great thing is, though, Mick, it's been a joy to write. I do most of my writing alone. You do most of your writing alone. And when we started this, I was in a different country. I was in the north of England. But this is, of all my books, this is certainly one of my favourites. And I'm terribly proud of it, actually. And it's you sort of think, oh, it's a small book and it's digital wine and it's with two gentlemen I both taught. But I read it and I go, wow, this could really make a difference.
I'm looking forward to seeing it. I haven't seen the final, final. None of us have seen the actual printed
No,
book.
no, this actual vodcast will come out before the actual book, but the actual book, I believe, is due in about 6 weeks. So it's now March.
Good.
By about May, the book should be out. So I hope you enjoy it. Mick and I would both love to talk with anybody who's interested in what we're discussing here. And, you know, as I said, this is you feel like you're doing something really positive, using digitisation, not for some sort of nonsensical end or some sort of bizarre marketing protocol. This is really an intervention in how we think about production and consumption. And for that, I couldn't have done it without you. I couldn't have done it without Bryn.
Yep.
And we're absolutely thrilled.
Now we need you.
Now we need you. Thank you for your time.